the scroll is endless, and something that is like such an amazing piece of content will just be gone, and the next day there's something new. Like, wow, the bicycle is like this unbelievable tool that is like such a positive influence on the world. And it's one of the only machines and one of our only inventions that you could actually say is like very hard to find negatives. Like, it is positive and helps people's lives no matter how they use it around the world. I think one of the things that like is the difference between people that might have a career in something and might not is just sticking with it. Like, if I look back at my career, I'm like, I don't know if I really did anything that special. It's I just kept doing the same thing for years and years and years, and eventually, you're like, okay, this is a career now.
Darcy Wittenburg, welcome to the Downtime
Oh,
podcast. How you doing?
good. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Well, we're obviously going to talk a lot about Anthill Films, find out all about that. But let's just find out a little bit about yourself first. Just give us some background. Where did you grow up, and how did you get into mountain biking in the first place?
Yeah, I grew up in North Delta, which is kind of a small town on the edge of Vancouver in British Columbia. And we had forests all around us growing up. So I just got into to riding bikes on the trails. At first, it was just with a BMX and like taking my BMX out onto the trails and not even really knowing what mountain biking was. That would have been in kind of the mid 80s. So mountain biking was just becoming a thing. And I remember my parents got me my first like actual mountain bike for my birthday. And I think that was the first time I like clued in that like this was like a thing that other people are doing, and there was actually like a name for it.
Awesome, and he had a perfect spot to get into that sport. Was racing part of your life, or were you just someone that enjoyed being on bikes in the woods?
Yeah, I never got into racing at a young age. I was actually a competitive gymnast my whole childhood until I was 18. So I was on the Canadian national team for a number of years, and that pretty much consumed my life when I was younger. Um, so beyond that, I didn't really have much like time or like more interest in racing. So for me, mountain biking like was always an escape, was always about exploration. Um, and then when I was 19, I moved up to Whistler. Um, and in those days, the bike park hadn't formed yet. And there was just so many trails, so many like logging roads and places to explore. So for me, mountain biking was always really about that exploration.
Amazing. I didn't realize the gymnastics background was there. What brought an end to that? What changed around 18, 19, and took you to Whistler?
Well, it was just graduating from high school, and then when you're competing at that level, you're training close to 40 hours a week in the gym, so you're just constantly inside. And I did grow up, with parents who were really into the outdoors, and so I've always had that interest, and kind of got to that age where I could make my own choices. You're turning 18, the whole world is opening up, and you're kind of thinking, do I still want to be like cooped up in a gym when there's a big wide world to explore? So yeah, I actually just before moving to Worcester, I went and spent 7 months in Switzerland because I actually have Swiss heritage and a Swiss passport. So my uncle owned a berghaus up near Davos in the Alpines. So after spending a summer there and just like biking insane single track all over the Alps, yeah, when I was done with that, I was ready to kind of move up to a mountain town, and obviously Whistler's right there. So uh, that's what happened.
Nice. So obviously a lot of riding while you were there, but what were you doing from a work perspective when you were in Whistler?
Well, when I was there, my first job was at Starbucks. I worked there for a couple of years, as a barista, which is a pretty good job because the schedule was always all over the place. So in the winter, I could go snowboarding a lot, working in the evenings and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I worked at the Dublin Gate pub for a number of years, painted houses. Uh, you kind of do a bit of everything in Whistler, you know, you're always bouncing around doing different jobs. So I did that for a number of years, and I had an interest in photography at the time as well. And then I just, through snowboarding, actually met some friends that were um, making snowboarding films, and they needed an extra hand, like someone to just grab an extra angle and film. And it was all pretty slack back in the day. It was all really low key, low budget stuff, right? And but that's kind of what like got me into filming. And then um, in 1999, Yearly Ricker was making the film Ride to the Hills.
Mhm.
Um, and I already helped him on some snowboarding stuff. So he kind of brought me on to more shoots. And then the first like film trip I ever went on was for that film. We went down to Utah, and we had Chandros, Dave Watson, Cody Swansboro, and Jordy Lunn. And yeah, I think that was it. And that was kind of the first ever film trip I went on. So um, yeah, and then from there things just kind of slowly snowballed.
Yeah, that's a
After
pretty cool
that,
place to start.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, I was really lucky. Like, just, I mean, the thing with living in Whistler is, you know, there's people that are, you know, very deeply into all the sports that exist up there. So um, I guess it wasn't that hard to meet people that were making films.
yeah, impressive. And you went then from kind of odd job in doing bits and pieces on various different films to becoming like full time within the film world. Was it Crank Five, the first film that you kind of moved into working full time with?
Yeah, exactly. Cranked Five was the movie that there was kind of a pretty tight shooting schedule that summer. It would have been the summer of 2002. And it did get to the point where I couldn't balance my job at the Dublin Gate anymore, and painting houses. I was kind of doing both. And yeah, that was kind of the moment to step off the ledge, and at least for the summer, and just work on that film. And so I ended up shooting quite a bit for that film. And in the winters, I was working on snowboarding films. And then it was this kind of spring of 2003, which was, I would say, the real pivotal moment for me. When Bjorn Enga, who was making the Crank series, we were talking about what he was going to do that year, and he said he wanted to take a break and take a year off. And it kind of left this void um, in the film space. And I had a lot of relationships with a lot of the writers that we had been working with at that point, and everyone kind of had this like desire to do something. And so that's where the idea like slowly started to form to do just to make a movie and pitch sponsorship, and that's what kind of started the collective.
Yeah, and you had a pretty unique approach to funding that first movie, didn't you? Was it right that you kind of got the riders to chip in some upfront to help get things moving?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We kind of got the idea from a snowboarding film, Robot Food. They had done something similar, and the cool thing about what they did, because the riders were like actively involved in funding the film, it gave it like a lot of street credibility right out of the gates, because everyone was kind of talking about how there was this like rider funded film. Um, and we did like legitimately need some money to get the film off the ground because we had nothing and no sponsorship yet. Um, so yeah, so we had five of the riders that were involved in the film basically put up the first bit of money that we needed to get the film off the ground. And when we went down to Interbike that year to pitch the film, it was actually a huge help because we went around to the different sponsor booths and kind of pitched the film and tried to get it going. And I really noticed that once people heard the riders were actually putting their own skin in the game, so to speak, it actually really got people quite interested and excited to sponsor the film, and that got things moving.
Yeah, and it feels like it
Yeah.
took off pretty quickly with those early collective films. I think it was Collective Rome and Seasons that were kind of under
Hmm.
that collective banner. What do you think was the key to success? Why did those really, get that much traction straight off the bat?
Yeah, we weren't uh, totally sure what to expect of our first film, and we just wanted to do a good job and just make something and, and make our money back on it. And yeah, the it just seemed like there was room for that style of film in the sport, which took things in I think like maybe a little more soulful, maybe a little more introspective um, angle that didn't really exist in the mountain bike world at that time.
Yeah.
Didn't totally exist really like in snowboarding or skiing to the same level as well, but we had seen it in surfing.
Mm.
And Jamie Hussein, who was my partner in the collective, like him and I were both influenced by the Jack Johnson films that had kind of come out just in those years before. There was September Sessions, Shelter, movies like that, and they just had like a real beautiful look to them, and we just remembered like long shots, like really long shots of waves and nice light. And it just kind of created a feeling that we really were drawn to. And so that was kind of our vision for the collective too, was just to kind of show longer scenes, longer shots, and just try to, I don't know, could just capture that feeling that we felt in the sport. So, um,
Yeah, it
yeah.
definitely worked. It caught people's imagination and got people engaged. So at what point do we move then from kind of the collective to Anthill Films? How did Anthill Films become a thing?
Yeah. Well, after we made the collective Rome and seasons, kind of that whole time, like we always knew that Jamie was going to go back and get into work with his family, and he was never really like always fully committed to having like a long career in filmmaking. Um, but the collective was successful, so we were like, "Sweet, let's do that again." And then the Rome was even more successful, so we're like, "Okay, I guess we should make this a trilogy." Um, so he kind of ended up getting pulled into it longer than he had originally planned. But during that time, Darren McCullough and Colin Jones, who are my partners in Anto, along with Ian Dunn, those guys were involved in all of the collective films as well. And so in 2008, when Seasons was wrapped up, I knew we wanted to do something again and keep this momentum going. And that's when we decided, well, let's form a new company and a partnership that all of us share in because we're all working on this together as a group. Um, and that's where we came up with Anthill.
And where does the name come from? I've always wondered.
Yeah, I do get asked this a lot. We were looking for something that was just kind of unique and stood out, and I was trying to come up with names that like meant something about collaboration and a group working together, and just something that signified collaboration and a group. And I was honestly, it was like made a huge list of names, and I don't know, Antil just stuck out as something uh, that clicked, and answered they're collaborative. They can, as a group, they can do way more than they can each do on their own. And yeah, that's where it came from.
Nice. And
Yeah.
Follow Me was the first film as Anthill, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
first kind of order of business with Anto was, I mean, we had not really planned on turning it into what it is now. Because at that time, like it was still very early days of YouTube. There was no Instagram. It wasn't really a time where there was like a lot of social media videos and web edits and things like that. So it was all about getting another film off the ground. And so when we formed the company, we had the concept to Follow Me. We pitched it, and that was the thing to kind of get off the ground. And it was after that film, then we slowly started getting other projects, like just short form, little commercial projects and things like that.
Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
that amazing section in Follow Me with G Atherton and Stevie Smith, who went on to become pretty intense rivals latterly in their careers. And it's awesome just to see the level of competition even then between the two of them in that shoot. It must have been a fun shoot to be part of. What's it
Yeah.
like when you're on a shoot? Can you feel when it's really clicking and when something's working like super well?
Yeah, yeah, definitely you can feel that when it's coming together. I mean, that shoot in particular, I mean, it was really fun and but it was hard. Like we had really bad weather on that trip. We were down there for 2 weeks and we were getting snow, rain, wind, um, and we were pretty stressed. Like by the end of the trip, we only had about 3 days left, and I was feeling like this is going to be the first time we've ever done a shoot where it's actually not going to work out. Like we don't have anywhere near a segment, and it is like this is the one. This is the one that's going to come home with nothing. And then the weather turned, and it all really came together in the last 3 days. Um, but it did make for a fun trip because even though the weather sucked, our spirits were pretty high and everyone got along so well. So, we were going out to the bar every night and we were just having a great time. But yeah, it came together in just a few short days.
Yeah, well, it is
Yeah.
definitely one of my favorite segments. And you've had some incredible movies over the years, but one that really stands out from your collection for me is Unreal. There's out of the sort of
Mhm.
part style movies that you've done.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a few things about that movie in particular. And the first was that Seminuk section, which is a single take, I think, where
Yeah.
he rides this huge line. He swaps bikes halfway down with that like acid drop off the cliff. Like, how do you even start putting something like that together? Like, where does the idea come from? Is it from Brandon? How do you find a location? How do you make it work? Like,
Yeah. It was a big process. That is an idea that we had for years, actually. Before that, and it wasn't for Brandon at first. I remember we were first talking about it in Kamloops, like just driving down some hills on shuttle roads, and just like imagining how cool it would be if there was a trail that like ran alongside the road, and like we could just do a shot that went on like forever type idea. And we just kind of held that in our mind for years until the right opportunity came up. And the concept for Unreal like felt like the right film to put this segment in. So then, we knew we wanted to do something with Brandon, and he was the perfect writer for that idea when the time came. So what happened next is I went down to California and had kind of made a list of a few ranches and made contact with some ranchers to just go scout their land and essentially rent the land to be able to build that line on it. And then we found that piece of property in Cambria, just off the coast. And yeah, then once we kind of had the property, we had a team of builders down there for 3 weeks building that line, and then we had to build a road that ran alongside the trail. Um, and so that was actually really challenging. I think that shot nowadays would probably be a little easier to pull off, and you'd probably just do it with a drone.
yeah,
Um, but at the time, we did it with a truck, and we had the GSS gimbal like mounted on the roof of the truck. And so it took like four of us to kind of coordinate that shot between the driving of the vehicle, that like timing it perfectly. We had a bunch of like points we had to hit along the road at the exact right second, so we were in a good angle for where Brandon would be on the course. Because some of those stunts, like if you were too far uphill or too far downhill, they wouldn't look good. Like it would be
Uh-huh.
literally a bad angle to film any one of those jumps from. So the timing was critical, and it took us days and days and days to work that out. So it was, I think, around the 10th day that we finally got like the shot. And that take is the only one where he did the whole line. Like that's like it. That's the shot. Yeah. So,
Incredible. Yeah, one of my favorite segments from any film ever. And I think the
yeah.
music is often an overlooked part of things, but it can really set stuff off. And the use of
Mhm.
that Buffalo Springfield track in that Seminole section is the perfect fit. How do you go about music selection? How much effort actually goes into that?
Yeah, quite a bit goes into that. Well, Darren McCullough, who's one of my partners and he's the lead editor, he's the one that is typically dealing with music. And we work with the music coordinator that is constantly sending us music and like giving us insight into what's available. But yeah, we were a bit stuck. Like we didn't know that the one shot was going to be as successful as it was. We were kind of worried about it. We thought maybe like are people going to think this is boring? Like you don't really know like how it's going to land. And we did have other songs and that and we were a bit like it's like maybe this people are just going to think like this is too drawn out. Um and then one day, like Darren just, I think he was looking for music, and then he just called me into his office and he said, "Hey, like, come check this out. Like, what do you think?" And as soon as we watched it, we were like, "Whoa, that just clicks. Like, it's the perfect vibe." Um, yeah, and it ended up being incredibly successful. I'm not sure even what the views really are at because it's still going, but it was, it was like 70, 80, 90 million somewhere like really high like years ago. So, yeah, that
Pretty
one.
rewarding to see work like pay off, right? Because that's a huge
Hmm.
investment of time, money, effort to make a shot like that. So to see it actually click with people must have been really cool.
Yeah, it definitely was. And it's like anything, it was a huge risk doing that. That's another shoot where I felt like, man, we are way out on a limb here because we had spent so much time and so much money on that one shot. And when you film a segment, normally you're building it in pieces. And if a rider gets injured or the weather turns or something works against you, usually you can salvage something. But with a concept like that, it's just all in. Like if Brandon got hurt, if we couldn't complete that shot, you would just leave with nothing. So it was definitely a huge gamble.
Yeah.
But
And in that film, you also seem to make it rain loam. I'm
yeah.
kind of keen to know how you did that. I've always puzzled over that one.
Yeah, that was a kind of a combination of two things. Like, yeah, for the ground, like for what we had, like um, on the trails was peat moss,
Uh-huh.
um, and so that's something that just can you can kind of spread, and it just kind of gave that like snow dirt feeling. And then for the what was actually falling from the sky, we actually went out and got a bunch of fake movie snow from like a special effects studio in Vancouver, and we had them dye it brown, just so it had that brown pow look to it. So, and it's like a cornstarch. It's all just like biodegradable stuff that just eventually dissolves as soon as it rains.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we just kind of figured out some techniques. We were just up on ladders and we were kind of like feeding it out of boxes into leaf blowers, and the leaf blowers would shoot it up into the sky. And we just had our frame, and it just made it made the brown fowl. So
Impressive work. Yeah, no messing
yes,
around. So
yeah, it was tedious.
you've you mentioned drones, and we've been talking about some of the technology, I guess, that you've used on the films. Over the time you've been making films, a lot has changed. Technology's progressed. Do you think that's changed the face of mountain bike filmmaking? You know, with drone usage, slow mo cams, better onboard footage. Like, there's a lot of kind of cool stuff that's enabled different things to be filmed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's progressed. I mean, so much over my career, which is it's crazy the level that it's gotten to with technology and the amount of like amazing, talented filmmakers that are out there. There's so much good content, and I think as a sport, we have actually a lot of passionate filmmakers. It's crazy like how much really good content actually comes out of this sport. So um, yeah, I mean it's changed a lot. I feel like recently, that it's in some ways it evens the playing field a little bit. Like everyone has drones, everyone has gimbals, everyone has good, editing equipment and know what they're doing. So it's really you can see how it's shifted more towards story and having like sometimes like a little more foundation to some stories and stuff behind the imagery.
Hmm.
Um, that being said, it's nice to have the balance between story and just good old fashioned just action. But I feel like the technology these days it really just allows you to capture the feeling of the sport and the motion and the momentum and the quickly traveling through space. Like I think you really get that feeling more and more now than ever before.
Yeah, yeah, definitely agree. Like the drone footage is progressing to a level where it feels a lot
Hmm.
more watchable, but
Yeah.
also more versatile. Like it translates the feel of the sport a lot better onto the screen, I think, than some of the older drone stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I think even with the FPV drones, we're going to see stuff maybe start to, at least this is my own prediction, but maybe just mellow out a little bit more. Like when that first came out, I mean, you'd see like a lot of drone pilots really flexing like how crazy they can fly and crazy angles and going through stuff. And like sometimes it can be almost like a little too aggressive, and it's almost more about like what the drone pilot can do and less about like enhancing the riding. And enhancing the riding is really the goal of the filmmaker. In the end, you got to kind of remember to get yourself a little out of the way and like it's about capturing the rider and the feeling of cycling. At least that's kind of my opinion on it. And I think we're gonna see some of that just maybe mellow out a little bit where you're not so twisty turny like it can be sometimes a little yeah, could be a little much, but it's pretty amazing. Like you're already starting to I feel like see that like that that perspective needs to be cinematic and fit, from a composition perspective in with the rest of the angles that are
Mm.
being used. So, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like we're just starting another film. I can't talk too much about yet because the sponsorship is still all being worked out. But we are embarking on another year and a half long mountain bike film project. And yeah, for the first time ever, we have earmarked in our budget having an FPV drone pilot on every shoot. So that's like a new thing that just wasn't. We've had drones for years, but not actually like having someone dedicated to that style of flying.
Yeah, interesting. That'd be good to see. How
Mhm.
do you think we're doing then? Where are we at with the sort of state of mountain bike filmmaking at the moment? It feels like it's a much more diverse space than it's ever been. There's a lot of formats with YouTube, Instagram, edits, shredits, whatever you want to call them. It feels like there probably is a bit less long form filmmaking going on.
Mhm.
Um, where do you think we're at? There's a lot of people. There's a lot of content. It's getting churned out. There's some really high quality stuff. But where do you see that scene in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just means that there is. I mean, it's like we were saying earlier. Like, there's so much content out there. It's so available on every platform and every shape and size that you can think of. Um, but the long form has been, um, often a struggle. When I talk to the other filmmakers that are also making longer form films, like it can be challenging to get a budget together, so you can work on a film for a year or so and be able to hold on to that footage. And the marketplace for selling longer form films is constantly shifting. Some years the streamers are up and they may want some content, and you might be able to sell a film for a decent buck. And then other years not so much. So that part I think makes it a little bit unpredictable as well. But I feel like that's not going to go away, and that'll keep coming back, because like a constant onslaught of like short clips doesn't really have quite the staying power that a film will have, or even a TV series where you're really like taking the time to like thoughtfully like curate and collect together a body of work and just present it as one whole.
Yeah.
That just needs to happen every so often. Just I don't know. I just always feel like whether it's our films or anyone else, there's something about a moment in time that's like captured and stamped, and it's there. It's obviously we all know that like the scroll is endless, and something that is like such an amazing piece of content will just be gone, and the next day there's something new. Um, I don't know where it'll go, but I feel like we'll need something to hold on to some of those like pieces of work as well, because there's so much good filmmaking out there that lots of people are doing, and like where is the kind of library that's going to be held,
Yeah, true.
in kind of the annals of like mountain bike history, right? Like that stuff
Yeah.
needs a home.
Yeah. Someone needs to curate all the good stuff into a place where we can all look at it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, some kind of
Yeah.
digital museum.
Something like that. I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna do it because that seems like a lot of work. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be something there where, like, as we kind of look back on the history of the sport, like there'll be things that happened in big moments and cool segments that were like timeless. And yeah, those need to live somewhere. And I mean, they do it with like with people in the way that we have a mountain biking Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'd never thought about it like that, but you're right. Be
yeah,
interested to see where that goes.
yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about Anthill Films as a platform, I guess, because you have a following. People
mhm,
want to see the next Anthill project. I feel like for you guys, maybe Anthill started out being something you loved. It was fun. You enjoyed it, and Anthill has grown and it's got a bigger following. Have you
mhm.
felt like a pressure to use that platform for more than just having fun? Like it feels like to some extent your direction has shifted a little bit in recent times. Is that something that you've felt?
Yeah. As we've grown as people and as a company, like it's definitely occurred to us, and we've had a lot of conversations about like where should we go and what is it that we're doing here, and we haven't really felt like pressure from anyone to say stand for something, but it has occurred to us that hey, like what are we doing? Our job is to inspire people to ride bikes. Like clearly we're excited about sharing like mountain biking and cycling in general, but specifically mountain biking with the world, and like we get excited about um, showing the sport to other people, and we have this like never-ending desire to do that. And that's when we kind of slowly like clicked that like our job is to inspire people to ride bikes. And so that's kind of been something that's been, I guess, a bit of a North Star for us, where we say, okay, well, when we're doing new projects or if we're kind of planning the future, we're like, are we a positive influence on growing the sport and inspiring people to ride bikes? And what are all the benefits of riding a bike? And there's health benefits and mental health benefits, and so many good things that come out of it. And so that's just where as we've kind of grown older, like realized like, yeah, we need to use this platform to kind of back up the things that we believe in.
Yeah. And it feels to me like Long Live Chainsaw, the movie about Stevie Smith's life, which is absolutely incredible, by the way. It feels like that was the first movie that went in a slightly different direction for you guys. It's much more like a documentary style than a parts kind of movie. How
Mm-hmm.
was it working on something so different and also so important to mountain biking as a scene, and especially
Mm-hmm.
to the Canadian side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really emotional film to work on. And it was something that, when Stevie passed away, like as filmmakers, I remember already at the memorial, we were like, oh, we have to do a movie about his life. Like, we were just trying to think of ways to remember him and to honor him. But there's no way that anyone was really emotionally ready, like at that point, or even the years afterwards. It definitely took a couple of years to get somehow, like, I don't know, just in the right emotional headspace to go in there and make a film, because there's something that you are attached to, emotionally, and then you
Hmm.
also need to be very pragmatic about it and actually make a film and draw out the story and go through the process of getting everyone involved. And I've got to know Stevie's mom when we filmed that season segment back in 2007. So I stayed in touch with her about it, and it kind of just got to the point where we were like ready to get moving on it. And that was just before the pandemic. We were starting to get serious about making the film. Um, but we always knew we wanted it to be a not-for-profit project. Um, and so finding the time was actually becoming the challenge, because we're busy and we're just, you know, like anyone, trying to keep our heads above water. And so when the pandemic came and we were all on lockdown and everything slowed down, suddenly it seemed like the right opportunity, where we're like, actually, you know what? Like, this is the perfect timing. We can start diving into the CV project. And it's the kind of project that could kind of happen remotely, because most of it is post production, gathering archival footage. And
Hmm.
um, so it kind of provided that opportunity for us to actually work on the movie.
Yeah. What's the response been like?
Yeah, I mean, it's so different than everything we've worked on, So like, I mean, just so many good vibes, I would say. Like, I mean, everyone, loved Stevie, and so I think it's just been such a positive film overall. Yeah, and I think it was, for a lot of people, maybe it's a good form of therapy, and just it's kind of like, I don't want to say like it's closure, because you don't really ever stop thinking about that person, and that doesn't really go away. But it definitely, I don't know. I just felt like it needed to happen, and it felt like we needed to like just gather together like Stevie's story, because it is a pretty inspiring story, and he was an amazing person.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And that's available, I think, for free, isn't it? Is it on Rebel TV?
Yeah, yeah, it's on Rebel TV. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Highly recommend people go and watch that if they've not seen it yet. It's a very special story. You guys did a great job in telling that, and that leads us on, I guess, to your latest project.
Hmm.
Again, very different, I think, from anything you've done before. Stepping beyond the world of mountain biking into cycling in general in all its
Hmm.
forms. Tell us a bit about where the idea came from and the motivation behind this project, because it's a big undertaking.
Yeah, it's a yeah, the engine inside is it's another one of those ideas that we have had for years, like close to a decade, I would say, is how long we've been talking about it. And it The original idea was much more of a visual concept than it is now, and so we just had this desire. We're like, look, we've been filming mountain biking for years, and wouldn't it be cool if we took like everything we've learned filming biking and applied it to different styles of cycling, like road cycling and I mean, gravel wasn't really a thing 10 years ago, but like just seeing like commuting and different sides of like how the bicycle is used around the world. Um, but in those early stages, we were definitely more focused on like the sport side of thing. Um, and as we developed it, we started to uncover these like amazing stories about how human beings are using the bicycle to improve their lives and improve the world around them. And the deeper we dug, the more we found that, like, wow, the bicycle is like this unbelievable tool that is like such a positive influence on the world. And it's one of the only machines and one of our only inventions that you could actually say is like very hard to find negatives. Like, it is positive and helps people's lives no matter how they use it around the world, whether it's recreation, whether it's transportation. It's so diverse. It exists everywhere. And one thing that always like struck us as crazy is that there's no film that exists that really shows how people are using the bicycle all over the world. Um, so yeah, it was kind of a big idea. That's probably one of the biggest challenges with the film is, when we started to unpack it, like the kind of world of cycling, it's way too big. Like it's like way too big. So, there's like, in a way, like the film is like 99% of it is like of ideas and things we talked about is on the cutting room floor because you really have to like boil it down to like what can we tell in an hour and a half long documentary. And so that's where we settled on six characters, and we tell the personal story of each person and how they're using the bicycle in their own way to shape their lives and the world around them.
How did you find those six characters? Because then none of them
Mhm.
are like big names. I'd not come across any of them before. I was lucky enough to see an early cut of the film. Like,
Yeah,
how do you source these people that have these incredible stories, but probably fly to some extent under the radar?
yeah. Well, another like kind of perfect little partnership that emerged coming out of this was actually back in 2017 when we were first trying to get this film off the ground. Um, we knew we wanted to work with a writer, and so we reached out to Mitch Scott. And for those that don't know Mitch, he's been a writer in our sport for 20 plus years. And so we reached out to him. He's based in Nelson, BC, about this concept and seeing if he'd want to be involved. And he was like, "Holy shit, guys! Like, I've been thinking the exact same thing. And check out this deck that like I've been sitting on for years." And like he flipped us his deck, and it was very similar to what we were thinking. And
No
like
way.
it was actually pretty crazy. I was like, well, this is perfect. You have the same idea. And he already had the name The Engine Inside, which is, I think, just a perfect name um, for the film. And so we started working on researching characters, and we just really just dug deep, made a big spreadsheet, like probably found like 40 or 50 people that um, had interesting stories. Um, but it was just purely through research. And I mean, any one of those people, they all had amazing stories, but we just started to really boil down like how they were using the bicycle, what community they represented. Um, it was super important for us to have like global diversity in this film,
Hmm.
as much as you can have with just a few characters. Um, but I mean, the bike is in every country in the world, so yeah, trying to capture that diversity was like definitely important. But like just to answer that question, like yeah, I mean, where we found the characters is just research, like just straight up research, talking to people, like Google searching different communities, like yeah,
Impressive. Yeah, it's insane. The stories of everyone involved in the movie are, yeah, mind blowing, and it's super powerful to watch. What are your hopes for the film? Because it feels like this has the ability to do things that nothing you guys have ever made before has done. Right? It goes further.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a big step for us. I would say coming from an action background to making a feature-length documentary about very personal stories. So, I mean, our hope is that that it inspires cyclists, that the cycling community as a whole, and everyone from road cyclists to commuters to mountain bikers to adventure athletes, anyone that's got a connection to a bicycle, we hope they watch the movie and appreciate the bicycle in a new way and maybe in a deeper level that they maybe haven't thought of. Um, and definitely a big goal is to break outside of the cycling space and kind of get some mainstream attention. Um, and that's always been the goal for anything, like us as cyclists, like we know we love to watch our own content, and we have this amazing subculture where we're all like stoking each other out. But I think the real home run would be getting people that aren't necessarily passionate about bicycles to realize just how amazing this thing is and maybe understand a little bit why we're also kind of nuts about bikes. Is like, yeah, they are absolutely mind-blowingly amazing. So um, yeah, that's the big goal. So we've this has been the hardest film we've made. I mean, our post-production process has been close to a year now. We've done so many revisions. We've had so much input from people from all walks of life and different sides of filmmaking. And I mean, we've got it now refined to a point where we're pretty happy with it. Um, you just got to eventually be done with it, and you got to just release it. Keep changing
How
it
it,
forever. Yeah.
yeah, how important is distribution in all of this then? Because, like you say, you've
Hmm.
got this audience of mountain bikers who'd be like, "Oh, new Anthill film, I'm going to go watch it."
Hmm.
But you want this to get to way more people than that niche within a niche kind of thing. Like,
Hmm.
how do you go about getting it in front of more people?
I the I mean, the short answer to that is simply just the content of the film itself, and distributors looking at it and seeing that they think there's a wide audience for this and that it'll appeal to mainstream society. Um, so, I mean, our strategy will be to first do a very good job of releasing it inside the world of cycling, using all the cycling clubs to help put on premieres, to have the cycling media, hopefully write positive articles and just spread the word. And if we can get a groundswell going behind the film from the world of cycling, hopefully that kind of gets enough attention. And hopefully distributors see enough momentum there that they decide that this is something that they want to roll the dice on and take on.
Yeah.
But it's tough.
What's the
Yeah.
dream then? Is it like to get it on something like a big streaming service like Netflix? Is that the ultimate
Yeah.
end game, or yeah?
Yeah, that would be the largest audience that the film could get. So when we release it, we do about a month or so of premieres. We definitely will be submitting it to film festivals. And film festivals can, of course, give it a lot of credibility, and hopefully you get all those nice laurels that you see on successful films. Um, but then it'll be available for download. But downloading, obviously, these days is not very common. Only the most passionate people that want to really own something like would
Mm.
ever download it. And so, yeah, getting it on a big streaming platform and having it be well placed and like really embraced by that platform is really the big goal for the widest possible audience.
Yeah. So if people are listening
Mhm.
to this and they want to see the film, and I highly recommend they do, it's a really powerful piece of filmmaking, and definitely got me thinking about bikes in a totally different way, and even more stoked that I'm involved in it in the way that I am. Like
Mhm.
how where do they look? Do they go to the Anthill website? Like what's the best thing for them to do?
Yeah, the Anthill website at anthillfilms.com or just going on to any one of our social channels. We're going to be communicating about it quite a bit. Um, and then the film's partners, which is Pond.bike, Shimano, and People for Bikes, they'll all be speaking about it quite a bit, about where you can watch it. But as we're recording this now, we're still in the process of like fine tuning, like where exactly it'll be this summer. But yeah, for sure, we're going to be talking about it quite a bit on our social channels for the coming
Excellent.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'll make sure I share some stuff on my socials as well when it's out there and available for people for
Hmm.
premieres or download or whatever that happens to be. Nice one,
Hmm.
man. Well, we should start wrapping up. We're getting close to the end of our time. I
Hmm.
guess we should not lose this opportunity to have someone like yourself on and not ask what advice would you give to people who want to get into mountain bike filmmaking? It's a very
Hmm.
different space to when you got into it, but what advice would you give people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the nice thing nowadays, I think it's a lot easier to get into in some ways. Granted, there's a lot of people that want the same thing, but I mean, now you can start to make good videos even just with your phone. So, um, but I would say probably one of the biggest things is just getting out there and doing it, making little edits and just filming your friends um, and just kind of continuing to move forward with it. I think one of the things that like is the difference between people that might have a career in something and might not is just sticking with it. Like if I look back at my career, I'm like, I don't know if I really did anything that special. It's I just kept doing the same thing for years and years and years, and eventually, you're like, okay, this is a career now. And that's probably the biggest advice I would say. It's just like, just whether it's filmmaking or anything else, like just pick a direction and just relentlessly move forward in that direction, and eventually you'll find yourself somewhere different than when you started.
Yeah, sound advice. So if you were going to shoot another parts-based film,
Hmm.
who would you want to shoot with from that modern crop of riders, and why? Like who excites you?
Oh, that's like probably the like hardest question, especially as we're getting close to wrapping up. Mainly because there's so many talented riders out there. Um,
Yeah.
and the more you kind of look at like riders and their backgrounds and their stories and what their desires are, you're like, man, they like there's the like dozens of riders that are worthy of like being in a film, and that's probably the hardest decision is like in the end is like boiling down like, okay, who are we going to work with? And but I mean it's really comes down to the person's attitude and willingness to like collaborate and be creative and put in the time and put in the work to create something special. It definitely at kind of the highest level, it takes a serious amount of patience and time and dedication from the rider to make something that stands out. Um, so I would say that's like a general answer. Like those are like the riders that we want to work with. I mean, luckily, mountain biking is like it's such a open and positive and inclusive sport that like most of the riders that I've ever met are amazing people, and um, so yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd echo
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Generally, everyone is incredible and always willing to get stuck in, which is really cool. All right, man,
Yeah.
we're going to wrap up with our final four questions that we ask everyone. The
Okay.
first of those is if our listeners had £150 or 250 Canadian dollars to spend to improve their performance on a bike or have more fun on the bike, what would you recommend they go and spend it on?
Like just on products on their bike.
It could be a
Um,
product, it could be a service, it could be anything really. Anything you can spend money on.
oh man. Well, that's a tricky one because bikes are pretty expensive. That doesn't go that
Yeah.
far if you're talking about improvement, but it would probably be um, oh, as I think about how wet the trails are right now, is making sure you get good tires. Fresh tires go a long way. Um, that and a fresh tune.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, second one. If you could wind back the clock and sit down with yourself, age 16, what advice would you give him?
Um, Probably to spend a little more time on now looking at my career. I'm like, there's probably some paying more attention to education in those early years probably would have been a good thing, you know? Kind of had to like do it the hard way slowly over time, having not done very good in school. Yeah. My son is 16, so I probably the advice I
Okay.
would give him, yeah.
Awesome. I love it. All
Yeah.
right, third one. If you could have a coaching session from anyone, past or present, who would it be and what would you want to learn? And this would normally be like a riding thing, but it doesn't have to be. It could be someone from the filmmaking world
Mhm.
or any world.
And who would it be? Like a coaching session from someone?
Yeah, who would it be and what would you want to learn from them?
Oh, man. Really ending on some challenging questions here. That like
Sorry
requires
about
some
that.
deep thought. Like what filmmaker would you? Because there's quite a few out there.
You can
Um,
pick a couple.
yeah. Well, he's no longer around, but Bruce Brown, who made The Endless Summer, like that movie influenced me when I was younger, even though it was like an
Mhm.
old movie when I was young. But um, that's someone who like had a vision to basically invent the genre that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would
All
say
right.
that. Yeah.
Nice. We'll take that one. And then the last one, what do you do every day that you feel benefits you?
Um, well, one thing I make sure I do every day is exercise, whether it's going to the gym or going for a bike ride. That has to happen every day. Um, doesn't always actually when we're filming and on the road, but um, I don't know. That's one off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's a good effort. It
Yeah.
definitely helps you feel like you're part of the day when you get
Hmm.
something good done like that. Nice one,
Yeah.
man. Well, it's been
Yeah.
really interesting chatting. I'm super excited to see how the new film goes and how it's received. It's an incredible watch. Thank you for all the work and um, all the hard work that you've put into that. It's hopefully going to get a lot of people thinking about the importance of bikes within the world. If people want
Mhm.
to find out more, just remind them where they should be looking.
They could just look at our website, anthillfilms.com, or on our Anthill Films Instagram is probably the best place where we're going to be updating all the time latest information about the film. So, yeah,
Perfect. I
yeah.
will stick some links in the show notes to all of that so people can find it nice and easily. But yeah, thanks, Darcy. It's been an absolute pleasure and look forward to seeing what comes next from Anthill.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.